Hello everyone, welcome to the KnifeEdgeUK YouTube channel. Back with another review, trying to get back into the swing of things after not having done any reviews for a little while. And here is a knife that I particularly would like to talk about. This is the Reeve knives Impinda. Obviously Reeve, an absolute heritage company, a name to conjure with in the knife market. And this is their introduction to the Slipjoint world. And of course, being in the UK, it garnered a lot of interest at the time of release. Apologies if you're getting some shadows and stuff on the blade, by the way. I've got a slightly different review spot, and I think I need to make a few changes to it. Anyway, we'll crack on regardless. So, a few size comparisons. As I said in my last video, I don't have as many size comparisons kicking around as I used to. Here it is alongside the diminutive number 14 pattern from Great Eastern Cutlery. We'll put it alongside a couple of knives which make some sense in terms of comparison with this guy. Here it is alongside a large Sebenza. Unfortunately, I don't have a small Sebenza to show you. It's actually fractionally larger than the small Sebenza, but obviously smaller than the large Sebenza. Here's a large Inkosi with the Insingo blade shape, as you can see. There's lots of family kind of connections with these knives, as you would expect there to be. Lots of Reevisms, but that gives you an idea. Here's a fancy little slip joint from Johan Ellis. This has got a 70mm blade, so that gives you an idea of the difference in scale between these two. And we'll come back to the size later on in the review. So, what do we actually have? Well, we have lots of typical Reevisms, but before that, we'll do a little bit about the history of this knife. Effectively, this knife came along out of a collaboration with Bill Harsey and Reeve Knives. Chris had, I believe I'm right in saying, already stopped working with the company, and it was his, I believe, ex-wife and son who are currently in charge and were while this knife was in development. Anyway, they went to Bill Harsey, who has done various fixed blade collaborations with Chris and Co. In previous years, and asked him, you know, about the idea of producing a slip joint, or vice versa. I'm not sure who approached who. And this was the result. The Impinda is made in a very typical Reeve fashion. It has blasted titanium, sandblasted titanium handle scales. It has an S35 VN blade in Reeve's beautiful stonewash finish. But from there, we diverge from typical Reeve specs quite considerably. First thing being, it's a slip joint with a nail nick. It's got an oversized exterior pivot, which is a nice unique look. Obviously, as I said, it's nail nick. It's got a milled pocket clip, and it's also got an S35 VN spring, which is quite a nice feature. And I believe I don't have the type to hand, but these screws were a new venture in terms of the steel material that was used for them. So the knife does diverge from Reeve enough to be sort of new and interesting, but at the same time, it's pretty classically Reeve. So let's look at the blade. The blade is a beautifully proportioned drop point. It's really, really nicely done. Lovely little swedge. Normally at Reeve, these are hand done. And indeed, this has a satin finish where the rest of the blade is stonewashed. So it was done post processing for the blade. It's hollow ground. It's not as aggressively hollow ground, as far as I can tell, as a Sebenza would be, or certainly a large Sebenza would be. But it doesn't feel like the flat hollow grind of an Inkosi either. It might be unique, or it might just be the blade height that's sort of throwing me off. Either way, it's not super thin behind the edge, but it is, as you might be able to see if it's focusing. It's not focusing. You're just looking at. There you go. You can see behind the edge it's fairly thin, it's not bad. It's running on Reeve's typical perforated washers, except they're set inside little recesses within the handle, which is quite nifty. And then we come on to the backspring, which there was a lot of fuss made at the time about it being a £1 pull to a £5 close, I think that was what they said. And certainly it's nice and easy through to where the half stop would be. This knife doesn't have a traditional half stop, but it does notably get harder to pull once you reach the point at which the half stop would be to overcome. So it feels like sort of a 1 to 3 pound pull, sort of if you went for, say, a 3 to a 5 or 6 as you went to the half. Then to close, it has quite a lot of pushback, so I never feel like this knife's particularly dangerous in any way. And because there's no half stop for it to spring into, you're not just going to have it ricochet down once you break that point of no return on that point. So it feels safe and comfortable. And while I don't quite see the 1 to 5 pound difference, it certainly is a difference, and it certainly works well. I've got no problem with the action on this. This one in particular is beautifully smooth. When I first got it, there was a slight judderiness halfway along the action, but that's disappeared as it's broken in. And everything is beautifully flush. Obviously, this isn't hafted like a traditional pinned knife would be, so you've not got, you know, perfectly even surfaces throughout. But unlike the first 50, and this is something that we'll have to discuss here, when they first released these, they did 50 at one of the big shows in the States. I can't remember which one it was now, and it might have been Blade Show. And that first 50 was not without its flaws. The backspring tended to be slightly ripply and uneven. It had sort of high points and dips. They hadn't tooled the non-tooled side of the pivot screw with a shelf, so it was free spinning, and they'd Loctited some of them, so getting into them was not good. All of these things are not very Chris Reeve, let's be honest about it, because they're oversights which for the first 50 weren't ideal. I can't remember if there are any other issues. There were people talking about gritty action and all that sort of thing. Anyway, once those first 50, which were semi-prototypes, I guess, were released at the show for the people there, they went back, and before the batches started to actually come out of the factory, they made... Oh, another change was... I don't know if you can see, but... No, you probably can't. Basically, this clip, which we will come back to, is on one point of contact. The original ones that were released at the show, as I say, had 2 points of contact and were very... they did tear up pants. All those issues are rectified. It has a shelf on the non-tooled side of the pivot, the display side, which is really nicely done, causes no problems at all. The backspring has absolutely no wander. There's virtually no gap anywhere at all. There's no flare towards the end, which some people have reported. The clip is very functional. It's certainly no Chris Reeve bent clip, but it's pretty hard to beat this clip. It sits fairly discreetly in the pocket, so there's no issues there. Or you can take this off and put a filler tab inside there, which Chris Reeve, in typical Chris Reeve fashion, have included with the knife, so there's no further purchasing to be made. You can take that out and put the little filler tab in, and you can carry it in the slip, which also comes with the knife, and I don't have on the table, but it's a classic Chris Reeve brown leather slip, which is perfectly fine quality and works very well. In terms of ergonomics, because I know I'm prattling on because it's a Chris Reeve and I do like Chris Reeve knives, are absolutely beautiful in the hand. It feels fantastic. It just falls into the hand. It doesn't feel in any way uncomfortable. It's very easy to handle. You can hold it in an overall fist grip like that. You can or a hammer grip. You can hold it in a handshake grip, or a saber grip, which is what my preference would be with a knife like this, so I feel like I can understand where the blade is. It holds in a pinch grip pretty comfortably as well. It's not as comfortable as some of the others, but it does work in a pinch grip. It's just really, really lovely. And no, I'm not going to talk about a reverse grip because, come on. So, yeah, it's just a beautiful knife. It's done incredibly well. It's a particularly nice divergence for Chris Reeve from, the classic Reeve integral lock, frame lock world that his knives, quite rightly inhabit. It's just really well done. We do have one problem for UK carry though, and it's exactly the same problem that I mentioned when I was reviewing the Birdie, which if I've released these in sync, is the last review that went up. As you can see, blade lengths here are about the same. So, what you're looking at is a knife with a blade length, forgive me, of 3 and a bit inches, and an edge length of bang on 3 inches. So, It will depend on your reading of the law in the UK, whether or not you think this is legal carry. As I mentioned in the last review, if you go to, and this is as I'm speaking now, if you go to the government website, it says 3 inches edge length. If you go to the police website, it says a 3-inch blade. So typical lack of consistency with knife laws in the UK, and lack of transparency. But you have to decide whether or not this is the kind of knife that you'd carry in certain elements and environments. I have my own feelings on that. There are places I will carry this, places where I probably wouldn't. But truth be told, you know, if you're not going to get... I'm not giving you legal advice. I keep on wanting to state my opinion, but I'm not going to. It's a lovely knife. It's really, really well done. It's a classic Chris Reeve in so many ways. It's lovely and slender. It pockets very well. It's a really, really good addition to the Chris Reeve lineup. And if you're a Chris Reeve fan, and I think that is important because Chris Reeve's knives are very expensive, and you have to care about the you know, the fabled tolerances and the simple things done well mentality that goes into a Chris Reeve in order to fall for his knives, or their knives as a company. And that's not something everyone's going to feel. You know, having sharpened as many knives as I have for customers and that kind of thing, I've grown to really, really appreciate a simple thing done well. You know, a sharpening choil that properly does not intersect with the plunge grind, an edge bevel that can be sharpened back from the edge without too much thickening up, a handle that's just solid and perfectly flat so everything lines up beautifully and is perfectly centered with virtually no hassle. If you care about, like I say, simple things done really, really well, then you'll probably like this knife and you'll probably see the value in it. It's certainly expensive. I would say it's on the very high end of what it can cost, but I like this one very, very much, and I'm in no hurry to part with it. But I am a Chris Reeve fan, and I do appreciate all those things. So if you don't buy this knife. If you do, I think you'll be very happy with an Impinda. There you go, guys. Thank you very much. Sorry I was a bit long-winded, getting back into the reviews and getting used to them again. So I am rambling and being a bit scatological. If you've stuck about till now, I love you. Thank you very much. Bye.